Welcome to Talk with Kristen with an E, the podcast that's like therapy, but cheaper and way more fun. I'm Kristen, host, storyteller, and occasional overthinker. From making friends to surviving burnout, reminiscing on our younger days, and learning how to adult, we'll chat about all life's lessons and laugh in between. So grab your drink, get comfy, and let's talk it out. Hey everyone! So today we are talking about a topic that is near and dear to my heart because it is something that I still struggle with. I'm dealing with it a little bit better than I used to be, but still something that is a work in progress. We're talking about burnout and boundaries. So today my guest is one of my good friends, Laura, and Laura is part of the reason that I was able to open my eyes to everything that burnout was, because for a long time I thought, I'm a little stressed, it's not a big deal. But then Laura had written this article at work about what burnout is and the different signs of it. Well, she didn't write the article, but she had shared it out with the workforce. And then I was like, oh my gosh, I really do struggle with burnout. So welcome, Laura. Thanks for being here. Is there anything you'd like to give us as an introduction for you before we jump right into this heavy topic?
No, I'm happy to be doing this with you, Kristen. Won't lie, I'm a little nervous about being recorded, but it'll all be good. But no, I do think that this is a topic that's near and dear to me too. I've been dealing, I think, with the concept of burnout and kind of my mental health associated with burnout for over a year now. And so I'm kind of excited to talk about it.
Great. So before we get too far into it, so that we're all on the same page, I wanted to share kind of a definition of burnout. Forbes had put out an article last month that I will also link in the description where they talk about what burnout is. And they say, burnout is a state of physical, mental, and emotional exhaustion that develops from prolonged periods of excessive stress and overwork. While stress is typically a reaction to an acute situation and resolves once the trigger subsides, the effects of burnout are far more damaging and pervasive. Often, recovering from burnout requires interventions other than rest. Intervention, that sounds very, very serious. So,
No, but amen.
right? I think that is what I need. Like, maybe I do need an intervention. So, Laura, to start, can you share your personal experience with burnout? You mentioned that, something that you've had for, years with your mental health. Well, how was your experience and what are some of the signs that you identify with?
Well, I will start out with saying that I didn't really know that I was burned out until I actually went to therapy with my husband for some marriage counseling. We had been not really communicating well. Some things were going on kind of personally that it just felt stressful all the time. And we had made a decision as a couple to kind of get some help and see if we could help some of those communication skills that we thought were kind of lacking. We've been married 30 years. And so it was a big piece of like, hey, wait a minute, something's off. Let's go see if we can get some help with that. And that was a big step in itself. And then very early into those sessions, my husband and I started talking to our therapist and realized just the amount of stress that our work lives were having on our personal lives and our
Mm-hmm.
relationship. And so that's where it kind of came into, oh, hey, here's what burnout is. Here's what kind of stress can do to a relationship. And we started going down this path, lengthy pretty path over a couple of months with some just activities to identify what our stress levels were and how we deal with stress. And then this concept of burnout. And actually our therapist was the one who had recommended a podcast episode with the 10% Happier podcast. I think I mentioned that to you before with Dan Harris.
Mm-hmm.
And the particular episode was why you're burning out and how to fix it. And once she shared that with both my husband and I, and we kind of like walked away from that particular session, it was eye-opening. It was like, oh, wait a minute. It was like a light bulb kind of clicked off and said, maybe it is where we're at. Maybe we are kind of letting that work-life balance isn't happening for us. We need to kind of look at this. So that's where I really started understanding that everything that I was, not everything, but a lot of what I was experiencing in my personal life wasn't an issue with my personal life. It was actually an issue with my work life. And so that's where I started to take a step back and do a little bit more education on my own. So I don't know that it was ever one epiphany besides those kind of just having conversations related to where I wanted to be personally, that then I backed up and recognized that, oh, yeah, I don't have a great relationship with work right now, and let me see what I need to do about that.
Well, and I think that's a great way to look at it too, because even when you read about burnout in different sites on the internet and everything, sometimes they really focus on just the corporate piece of it, like, oh, corporate burnout, burnout in the workplace. But like you bring up, it's kind of the whole person part too. Like you can have the stress in your family or home life that may affect you at work, and you can have those different stressors and issues at work that can affect your family life. And for your whole mental health is you as a whole person, and all of those things do have an impact on each other, and being able to know which one has the stressors that you need to deal with can help you kind of figure out where you need to work on, right?
Well, yeah, and I think that's kind of like one of the concepts that we were introduced to is this idea of a stress bucket, right? And that all of the things that you have in life, work, children, activities, right, your personal relationships, all of that goes into a bucket. And you basically, if there's lots of stressors, if you don't have an overflow for that bucket, or a tap is kind of how it's described to like release some of the pressure, the bucket's going to overfill. And so where is that overflow going to go? It's usually going to result in, different emotional responses, or these feelings of exhaustion or anger, or can look a lot different for different people. But then you have to kind of recognize, okay, well, if my bucket is full, maybe this month I can start to look at maybe stressors in this area, and I can kind of really alleviate it. So it's like, how do you deal with your bucket? And then
Mm-hmm.
how do you help yourself by identifying or recognizing, I guess is a better word, what you need to do to make sure that the bucket doesn't overflow.
Yeah.
And I think that was a really hard concept I'm still struggling with a little bit.
No, and I think I like the idea of the bucket, especially if you visualize it and you kind of want to keep them balanced. You don't want one bucket too full than another, that it starts spilling over and then other things are falling, like on a scale. Like if one's too heavy, it starts lifting things and everything starts jostling. Like there has to be a way to kind of keep them even so that you have a little bit more balanced approach to things. And I like how you talk about the bucket. The other thing, recognizing is huge. I had taken an emotional intelligence course in my master's program, and there was a whole thing about being able to identify feelings and recognizing how you respond to different triggers. And that when you understand kind of patterns that you develop, like when this happens, I react this way, or when this happens, I react that way. And I think that was the big thing for me, was figuring out what I was reacting to or why I was reacting. Because when I, and Laura has seen this at work a time or two, when I get really, really frustrated, I just cry. It's not because I'm sad. It's not because I'm upset. It's not the typical emotions that you associate tears with. Mine is the frustration. And I find that, you mentioned stress buckets, is like when my bucket at work gets too full, it overflows in tears. And being able to understand, like, okay, I am feeling this way because of this action, and I can choose how to react to it. Because a lot of times the tears and frustration that bubbles out is just how I react without thinking about it. Like it's my response to it. It's not necessarily how I want to respond to it. That was just how I'm like triggered to respond. I don't know if that makes sense.
Oh no, it's like it totally makes sense, right? Because your way that you're going to react to stressors in your life are different than how I'm going to react.
Mm-hmm.
And the threshold is different too, right? So that's good that you've been able to recognize, like, hey, I know that if I meet the point of tears, right, that maybe that is like really high up that temperature thermometer of
Mm-hmm.
like, this is where I need to break. And that's kind of just the dam that breaks in the moment on how my body reacts to stress. Because that's the other thing I think people, maybe that's kind of like a little bit of a misconception, but stress has such a physical toll on your body, and your
Mm-hmm.
body reacts to stressors in such a physical way. It's not just emotional, right? Like if you're hungry, the hangry,
Mm-hmm.
which I know
Yes.
that I have, there's a need there. Your body is telling you that there is a need to deal with the thing that's uncomfortable or the stressor in the moment. And for you in those moments, it's tears.
Mm-hmm.
And, in other moments, it might be, okay, you just need a Snickers bar, like, Betty White said, and then
Right.
we're all happy, right?
Yeah.
So, no, it's totally understandable.
No, and bringing up the physical thing too, there are other ways. There's the fight or flight thing where your heart rate goes up, you get sweaty. The other thing I have is I will start turning red, like all down my neck and chest. It's like a stress rash, which I've Googled. It's a legit thing according to the internet, is that I will start getting very flushed. And that's like when my body is getting ready to, like, okay, it's too much now. There's too much stress. We need to find a way to calm down and kind of relax a little bit. So paying attention to the signs before you get to the extent of the, like, I'm burnout, there's no coming back from it. Being aware of what your body's telling you along the way, I think, is huge too.
Oh, absolutely. Because that flight or fight is like, it's ingrained, right? And so that actually, our therapist had used that as an example because I have someone in my life who has the same physical reaction. Again, bodies are different, we react to different things. And she said, you always have to take care of that physical need to help the emotional side calm down. So
Mm-hmm.
for like a flushing or that sense of heat that comes up your neck, she's like, you could do something as simple as an ice cube or a cold towel on the back, and you've kind of like ridden through that, emotional wave. And once the emotional's down, then you can kind of like, okay, I'm rational. I can think of like, hey, how do I want to work on the stressor that triggered that for me? But you have to take care of the body first, or you're not going to be able to take care of the mental part afterward. And I think that's the biggest lesson I've learned over almost 2 years now.
Yeah. So you bring up a good point. We're talking about the stressors and the feeling stressed. So how do you distinguish between being stressed and truly experiencing burnout? Like, where are those differences for you, and how would you explain them to someone else?
So I think that would have to go back to like what I consider the signs of burnout. And you mentioned a few earlier. There's a lot of things on the internet you can Google, and you'll get probably 50 million different. Here's 9 signs, here's 12 signs, here's 14 signs, and there's a lot, right? So when I was kind of learning about this in the beginning, I went back to three that I found from Harvard Business Review back in 2016. And they worked for me a little bit better. One, because there were only three, and that's a little bit easier to manage for me,
Yeah.
than nine. And there's a bunch that we'll talk about the physical symptoms and that kind of stuff. But the first one was exhaustion. And that was just cognitive, emotional fatigue. It was undermining the ability to be able to work effectively and to feel positive about my work.
Mm.
And then the second one was cynicism, which it was just kind of an erosion of an engagement, I think is how they described it. And you just wanted to distance yourself psychologically from the work you did. I used to
Mm-hmm.
always enjoy the work that I did, and then I just wasn't enjoying it anymore. And I was becoming more of a cynical person, even for me. I'm not the most positive person. I know that anxiety can drive a
That's why
lot
you're
of
friends with me, because I bring out the positivity for you.
You do, which I appreciate. It's great because you help me see a different side of things. But that was kind of the second one. And then the last one was the feeling of incompetence. And that's where I really,
Mm.
really struggled. And it's also the big one that made me recognize that I was in a burnout situation. I had always had this relationship with work that I didn't want to seem as a failure, that
Yes.
I didn't want to feel like, oh, I wasn't giving it all. But yet, because I felt so overwhelmed, I was making more mistakes. And then that would just lead to the circular kind of, wait, no, you are a failure. You didn't do that right. And
Mm-hmm.
so I think those three things together for me, it wasn't just I didn't get enough sleep the night before. It was like I was just physically exhausted all the time. My cynicism, kind of like just where I was no longer engaged. I just wasn't enjoying the work that I did. And then that kind of just feeling of incompetence were really different for me because when I'm stressed, the stress I can relieve pretty quickly, going back to that stress booklet. If I'm just stressed by a task or there's something that I'm doing, if I put in a boundary or I'm like, okay, I can work it this way, or I can give myself a small break, get up, take a walk, then that to me is stress because I can
Mm-hmm.
deal with stress a little bit more timely than
Yeah.
I can deal with burnout. Burnout's long term, and burnout requires really for you to pivot with how you're operating.
Yeah, I compare it almost to having a sad day and actually being depressed. Like, the stress
Yeah.
is something in the moment. You say, okay, this is a stressful situation. I can remove myself from the stressful situation. Or this is a stressful activity. I'm not going to engage in that activity. This is a stressful person. I'm not going to be around that person. But burnout is like when you can't get away from it. It is all day, every day, no matter what situation or activity or person. There's no coming back from it. And talking about that disconnection from work, the cynicism or the apathy or the lack of enjoyment. I feel like when I've gone through burnout, it's almost like a cycle for me. Like there's a stressor, I don't deal with it. It keeps getting worse. It keeps getting worse. And then I'm finally at a place where like I hit my breaking point. Like, okay, now I'm burnout. And then I deal with it. I get myself back and we're like, okay, things are good. I like my job again. Things are great. And then little things start happening again. Then I'm stressed and I don't deal with the stress and it keeps going. And then all of a sudden I'm burnout again. And I don't think it's necessarily things at work because usually stuff at work is kind of steady. It's the same level of stress and dumb stuff and whatever we're dealing with of the day. It really is me and kind of how I am handling it because there's some days where something will really stress me out and then another day the same thing could happen and I'm like, that's no big deal. And it really is where I think I am on that cycle of how I'm feeling and how I'm managing it and how I'm dealing with what's going on inside of me.
Yeah, I think that goes to show too, like boundaries are really important. And I think I probably feel back in that state of kind of burnout or that I'm getting close
Mm-hmm.
when I haven't been successful at keeping my boundaries in place. And so that's probably also where your cycle is. I
Mm-hmm.
know that we've talked at work like, hey, well, we're doing really well. We feel really positive and productive. And it's like, okay, this is working and it's moving and grooving. And then something comes in for whatever reason. And maybe those things that we had put in place to try to help fence ourselves off from the feelings of burnout or the symptoms that are kind of associated with it aren't quite as effective. And that's where the long-term care is, to where you kind of have to mentally shift a little bit and say, okay, well, maybe there's a different technique I can use now to help me keep on the path of positivity. So it saddens me that you feel like it's cyclical because I hate that for you, because I think what I would like for both of us, not just me, but to really have it be long-term progress to where we don't
Mm-hmm.
feel like those cycles are occurring as much, or that you're getting to a better place with your work relationship to where it's not happening in the way that you're describing now.
No, and I think it is. I think it has gotten better since we've been, addressing the burnout and understanding it more. I think so much of it too is just the awareness of, hey, this is more than just stress. This is burnout. You've got to take care of yourself. And in those times where I do feel burnout, then I know I need to kind of unplug a little bit. It's almost like I have to take a step back and be like, okay, this isn't that important. I take time and focus on the other things that are in my life, spend more time, with my husband and my son, or getting out with friends more, or reading more, like the things that bring joy to my life, and kind of taking a break away from that and realizing that where the stress is coming from, that's not the most important part of my life. There are other areas. And sometimes it is just taking time off. I took some time off for the winter holiday break and then we had a blizzard. So I got extra time off. And being away from work again gave me that perspective just as a reminder, like, this isn't the most important thing. You have a life. There are other things out there. And to kind of take things not as seriously so that when things do trigger me or upset me, I take a step back and be like, okay, well, that's rough, but whatever. It is what it is, and we're going to get through it.
Yeah, no, totally. I
So,
agree.
so dealing with burnout. So my friend Adam Grant, I call him my friend. He's not really my friend in real life, but if he wanted to be my friend in real life, I would totally be his friend. But my friend
But didn't
Adam
you
Grant,
meet him?
so I
Like you
did.
did meet
Yeah,
him.
so I went to a conference last year and I was so excited to see him. Like, he was one of the keynote speakers and I'm like, "Oh my gosh, I'm going to meet Adam Grant." I didn't actually get to meet him, but I did go to every panel he was on and was ready to meet him if he had been available. So
Yeah,
someday
no, I
I
feel
will be
like this is a
friends.
start of a friendship. You should totally
I
say
will
you're
keep
just friends.
pursuing
Like
it.
it's
Yes.
there. Yeah.
So my friend Adam Grant said, "The best antidote to burnout is not teaching coping skills to handle stress. It's redesigning work to reduce stress. To prevent exhaustion, we need to remove overwhelming demands and reject the norm of self-sacrifice. Healthy workplaces value well-being as much as performance." And I shared that with you, Lara, and you loved it.
You did. And I put it in my signature box and my email. So yay, Adam
Yay!
Grant, and yay for Kristen introducing me to Adam Grant. It completely makes sense. Now, what he says makes sense. How challenging that has been to achieve it,
Right. Like, how do
right?
we
I
actually
didn't quite
implement it?
expect. So I do appreciate it, and I still believe it wholeheartedly. I just find there's sometimes that there's some challenges in getting that environment. I keep telling my team we can control the chaos,
Mm-hmm.
but we can control. Like what's in our realm, we will do everything possible to make sure that it's working best for us all. Doesn't always mean that we're able to control the chaos that's outside of that bubble. And sometimes we have to find different ways on how to deal with that. And I don't know if it's work for everyone, like if everybody kind of experienced that. I kind of suspect that the same is true across, like whether you're in industry or whether you're in
Mm-hmm.
government or whether you're in academia. I feel like there's probably similar problems across them all. So I don't think this idea of changing the work environment to reduce the stress is unique.
Mm-hmm.
The challenges, I guess, that I would say with that.
Well, because the other thing Adam said is that too many leaders label people as lazy when they're actually exhausted. A steady decline in effort and output is a common symptom of burnout. When people are drained, they don't need carrots and sticks to motivate them. They need fewer demands and more support. And I think that's the point you're getting at too, is understanding where people are at. And
Yeah.
we talk about being able to recognize and identify burnout in ourselves, but I think whether you're a manager or a coworker, it's still important to kind of look out for those around you too and identify it when burnout is happening with them, and being able to help people understand and again build a stronger awareness and then identify if they are your employees, what do they need. It's not the carrots and sticks or whatever, but how do they need to be motivated? How can you help uplift them to be able to get out of a burnout rut and get to be more productive so that they feel that their work is rewarding and that they're contributing to the team.
Right. No, absolutely. And I think what I have kind of changed with, that initial, again, kind of power of what I have to change,
Mm-hmm.
both personally and for my team, it's that reframing of the mindset is really one of the most important steps to take. And I try to take that on a daily basis. Sometimes it doesn't always happen in the beginning of, say, I'm dealing with something, but I try to always circle back and say, okay, how can I do something differently?
Mm-hmm.
And then what is it that I actually can change in that work environment, which I think gets to the beginning of the quote, right? But yeah, I do think it's important to understand how it's impacting my team as well, just because of the supervisory positions that we're both in. But
Right.
I think if I don't manage the time I need for my kind of own self-care, I'm not
Mm-hmm.
going to be good for them either. So it's that kind of delicate balance, at least when you're in a manager position. But I think that the self-care and the reframing the mindset is exactly the first few steps that you have to do to kind of help create that environment that Adam Grant is talking about and kind of recovering overall from burnout.
Well, and that's what they say. I feel like the example's overused, but it's still a good example that when you're on a plane and the oxygen masks come down, you need to put your own mask on before you put the mask on somebody else. And it's like it's the same way with things like this when it comes to mental health and burnout, that you have to take care of yourself and have yourself in a place where you're okay before you can really be a benefit to somebody else. Because it's hard to tell somebody, oh, don't be stressed, don't let that bother you, here, deal with it this way, when you yourself are falling apart and overwhelmed. And so it's one of those, oh, do as I say, not as I do. We have to be examples too and show, hey, this is a way that it works, and I figured out a way that can help, and now let me help you.
Yeah, and I also think that conversation helps other people respect the boundaries that you're putting in place for yourself, because
Mm-hmm.
that's the other big one. And we talked about this a little bit, we touched on a little bit earlier, but the boundaries are super, super important. And I think that's one of the challenges is that you've set these boundaries for yourself. You can even set them as a team. But what happens when people are not really respectful of those boundaries in that environment? So I think it kind of all goes together. And I think that's probably one of the most challenging things, at least has been for me, is the respect to the boundaries that I set.
Yes. And boundaries is a whole topic that we'll be able to get into in our next episode. So I definitely want us to be able to continue that then and kind of do a deep dive. But before we close on burnout discussion. Laura, are there any final comments you want to make on burnout or any big statement that you want to have the listeners remember as they go forward and look for burnout in their own lives?
Oh, so much pressure. Actually, no. I think the only thing that I want to leave people with is I think burnout is easily dismissed. Sort of
Mm-hmm.
like you said, oh, just do this differently and you'll be fine. And it really is a mental health issue, not just a complete stress capacity kind of issue. If you're not shaping, reframing, looking at your work environment in a way that's best for you to where you're prioritizing yourself, then you're never going to recover. And I think that's one of the hardest things, especially if we're looking at how people see us and you don't want to feel like a failure or you
Mm-hmm.
just want to, dismiss yourself. Even if you try to change the environment to another one, but you've never dealt with the burnout itself, just changing jobs will probably not help you. So to really look at this as a mental health issue and prioritizing your mental health in your work environment just as much as your personal life, I think is probably the key takeaway that I would want everybody to understand.
Yeah, I would 100% agree with that. And I would add on that self care is not selfish. And that's something I've tried to remind myself too, because, like you said, it is a mental health thing and it's so important to deal with what's going on the inside. And that's going to impact what's going on the outside. But you have to take care of that inside first. And that it's not selfish to look out for yourself. Yes, you still want to do a great job and do whatever, but you have to make that time to take care of yourself first. Put yourself first, take care of your needs first, and then you can go from there.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, thanks for this, Laura. We'll look forward to talking about boundaries in our next episode. So, everyone, make sure you like and subscribe so you can follow along with our conversation next week. All right. Thanks, Laura.
Thanks.
Thanks for spending time with me on Talk with Kristen with an E, where it's always cheaper than therapy. If you enjoyed today's chat, don't forget to subscribe. And hey, let's keep these conversations going. You can find me on Instagram at Talk with Kristen with an E. Let me know what's on your mind. Until next time, take care of yourself. And remember, life is always better when we talk it out.